My name is Evelyn, and I'm 78 years old. Before I retired, I spent my whole life working as a librarian in our town, dealing with books every day. It was a quiet, peaceful life. My late husband, John, and we truly spent our entire lives together. Even when we were young, he used to say I had a quiet, bookish air about me, that I was a perfect match for the library. We weren't rich, but we lived a steady life, and our relationship was always harmonious. John passed away 2 years ago. It was sudden, just the way he liked things, never one to make a fuss. He fell asleep and never woke up. I cried so much then. It felt like my world had ended. This house, we saved up for it and bought it together when we were young. It's not big, but every corner is filled with our shared memories. After he left, I lived here alone. Sometimes looking at his favorite armchair, I'd feel an empty ache in my heart. But life has to go on, right? I tried to calm myself down, tending to the flowers in the yard, reading the newspaper, and occasionally going to the senior center in town to play cards and chat with my lady friends. Life wasn't as lively without John around, but it was peaceful and quiet. My only daughter, Brenda, is a capable woman. She married Mark, who's in real estate. They've always lived in the city and are usually very busy. When John was still alive, they'd come back to visit, but honestly, not very often. Young people have their own lives, after all. But ever since John passed, Brenda and Mark became extraordinarily concerned about me. I remember it clearly. It started about 6 months ago. At first, I felt incredibly comforted. Really, for an elderly woman living alone, it's heartwarming when your children visit often and check in on you. They would drive over almost every week, bringing some of my favorite pastries or some nutritional supplements that were supposedly good for seniors. Brenda would help me tidy up the kitchen, and Mark would prune the overgrown plants in the yard. They'd also sit with me, chat about daily life, and ask how I was feeling or if I was sleeping well. "Mom, we're just not comfortable with you living here alone. Look, that orchid was almost dead last time. If Mark hadn't been so sharp-eyed, it definitely wouldn't have made it," Brenda would say then, her tone a mix of concern and a hint of reproach, as if she were truly thinking of my well-being. Hearing that, I even felt a little guilty, thinking I might truly be getting old, unable to even care for a flower. Mark, he wasn't as talkative as Brenda, but every time he came, he'd look around the house, occasionally remarking, "Mom, this house is getting old. I wonder if the roof shingles might be loose." Or, "Last time I was here, I noticed this window doesn't seal properly. You could freeze out in the winter." At the time, I thought he was just concerned about me, wanting to help me maintain the house. After all, this is our family home, isn't it? This old house was the biggest asset John and I had our entire lives. Those days I was truly happy. I even told Sarah, my best friend of decades, on the phone. "Sarah, Brenda and Mark are truly dutiful now. It seems I haven't lived in vain at this age. I'm finally getting to enjoy the fruits of my children's care." Sarah chuckled on the other end, happy for me. Back then, I really believed John, in spirit, would also be pleased for me. This sweetness was like a thick layer of frosting, completely hiding the turbulent undercurrents beneath. Until one day Brenda visited again, and she suddenly said to me, "Mom, have you been forgetting things lately? I told you last time that I'd pick you up for the clinic tomorrow, and you forgot again." I was taken aback. When did I ever say that? My memory isn't as good as it used to be, but I don't forget things completely, do I? Though I felt a little confused, I didn't think much of it, just assumed I was truly getting old and occasionally a bit forgetful. Brenda said, "Mom, Mark and I discussed it, and we think it's best for you to have regular checkups at your age. This time, we'll go to a specialist's office. The doctor will give you a comprehensive checkup to see how your health is, especially your memory." I'd always trusted Brenda, so when she said to go, I went. Brenda drove me there that day. The clinic looked very clean, and the doctor was a young Asian man with glasses, looking quite refined. In the examination room, the doctor started asking questions, but they sounded a bit odd. "Ms. Evelyn, do you often forget where you put your keys?" the doctor asked, his voice gentle. Before I could answer, Brenda interjected from beside me. Doctor, she doesn't often forget, she always forgets. Last time, she left her bank card at the supermarket. If the supermarket staff hadn't been kind, who knows if she would have gotten it back? My brow furrowed when I heard that. It was true I'd left my bank card at the supermarket once, but that was years ago, and it happened because I was distracted by a phone call, not because of forgetfulness. The doctor then asked, "Are you able to manage your own finances, such as paying bills or handling banking?" I was about to say, "Of course I can," when Brenda cut in again. "Doctor, you wouldn't believe it, but Mom needs several pairs of glasses just to read the newspaper now. She almost forgot to pay the utility bill last time. I had to remind her. And she's so sensitive about numbers now. Last time, she was missing a few dollars from her bank account, and she thought the bank made a mistake and insisted on arguing with them." My heart sank. When did I ever argue with the bank? Those few dollars were my own miscalculation, nothing to do with the bank, and I didn't argue. I just inquired. Everything Brenda said sounded like she was deliberately exaggerating. The doctor continued to ask questions about my daily living activities, such as whether I could cook for myself, bathe, and dress myself. Every time I was about to speak, Brenda would quickly jump in, describing my answers as even less than satisfactory. She'd say, "Doctor, she has to keep the range hood on when she cooks now, or she always forgets to turn off the stove. Or, she can dress herself, but sometimes she wears her shirt inside out and claims it's fashion." I sat there, feeling like a product on a shelf, letting Brenda label me however she pleased. The doctor listened to Brenda, occasionally nodding, occasionally looking at me with a subtle scrutiny in his eyes. I vaguely felt something was wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. I just thought Brenda was acting very strangely today. She wasn't usually like this. It seemed she was deliberately trying to prove something to the doctor. At the time, I just felt a little uncomfortable, but I didn't think deeply about it. After all, she's my daughter. She wouldn't hurt me, would she? After returning from the clinic, Brenda and Mark visited more frequently, almost daily. They no longer just checked in on me. They started talking more about my health and some future plans. "Mom, this house of yours, it really is getting old. How about this? You pick out an assisted living facility you like, and we'll arrange it for you," Brenda suddenly said one day. My heart jumped. Assisted living? I'm perfectly fine. Why would I live in an assisted living facility? Mark chimed in. "Mom, think about it, living here alone. What if something happens to you and we're not around? How dangerous would that be? In an assisted living facility, there are caregivers, doctors, and lots of people your age to chat with. It's perfect." I looked at them both, feeling more and more uneasy. Assisted living? I'd never thought of going to such a place in my life. My home is here, my John is here, all my memories are here. A few days later, I was home alone. It was an overcast afternoon. I took a nap, and when I woke up, I wanted to get a book from the living room. The living room was empty, the TV was off, and it was quiet. Just as I reached the living room entrance, I heard Brenda and Mark's voices coming from inside, hushed, as if they were afraid of being overheard. I stopped, instinctively leaning in to listen. "The POA, are you sure it's all set?" That was Mark's voice, sounding a bit anxious. Brenda whispered back, "Don't worry, I've already spoken to the doctor. He'll cooperate with us on the last report. And that old woman, she's getting more and more confused now. She probably won't even understand what we're talking about." My heart leapt into my throat. "POA? I think John mentioned it once. Isn't that a medical power of attorney or financial power of attorney? What were they trying to do?" Mark's voice came again. "Good. We need to act quickly on this. You know, the longer we wait, the more complicated it gets. While she's still not fully aware, let's get it done." Brenda sounded a bit impatient. I know. Isn't this all for her own good? She's living here alone now, and this old house will eventually be a burden. Once we get that, we can sell it directly. Then, with the money in hand, we'll be much more comfortable. Old house, sell it. A buzzing started in my head, like something exploded. My heart turned to ice, a chill shot up from my feet to my head, and cold sweat trickled down my spine. I stood there, stiff as a stone, completely unable to move. I listened as they continued to discuss words like assessment, lawyer, title. Each word like a cold knife, stabbing fiercely into my heart. I didn't make a sound. I quietly retreated to my bedroom, closed the door, and then leaned against it, breathing heavily. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. My own daughter, my only daughter Brenda, was actually planning to kick my old bones out of my house and then sell my home? What was going on? I suddenly remembered Brenda's performance at the clinic a few days ago, those odd questions, those exaggerated descriptions. It turned out all of that was paving the way for today. She wasn't concerned about me. She was pushing me into a trap, step by step. Over the next few days, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I watched Brenda and Mark. They still acted so dutiful and concerned. But I knew their concern was just to mask their greed and schemes. I tried to pretend everything was normal, chatting and eating with them as usual, but my heart felt like a huge boulder weighing down on my chest, suffocating me. I even started to wonder if they were secretly observing me every day, checking if I was getting more confused. About a week later, the mailman delivered a letter. The envelope bore a logo I'd never seen before, Adult Protective Services. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a notice. It blatantly stated that I needed to undergo a cognitive assessment, and the applicant was none other than my daughter, Brenda. At that moment, the letter slipped from my trembling hand like a withered leaf and fell to the floor. I stood there, stunned, feeling as if all the blood in my body had frozen. All the fragmented pieces, all the doubts, clicked into place at that moment. The questioning at the clinic, Brenda's exaggerated descriptions, the unintentional eavesdropping in the living room, and those words they spoke about assisted living, old house, and quick sale. It turned out that I, a living, breathing old mother, had become nothing but an incapacitated pawn in their eyes. They wanted to turn me into a vegetable, unable to make my own decisions, and then brazenly sell the house John and I had cherished our entire lives. My home. They wanted to strip me of everything, to kick me out onto the street. An unprecedented wave of despair and fury, like a surging tide, instantly engulfed me. I stared at the letter on the floor, Brenda's name glaring under the sunlight. My own daughter. How could she do such a thing? My heart felt torn apart, a pain so deep I couldn't breathe. But amidst that heart-wrenching pain, a firm, cold resolve quietly began to grow in my heart. I, Evelyn, may be old, but I'm not senile yet. I've lived an honest life, never done anything to feel guilty about. My home, my dignity, I would never give them up without a fight. She thought I was old and had lost my marbles? She thought she could just label me as incompetent? Humph. She greatly underestimated her old mother. I wouldn't just sit idly by and let it happen. My recordings would make them lose everything. I stared at that letter, a burning rage igniting in my eyes. A silent war had officially begun in my heart. The moment that thought popped into my head, Brenda and Mark arrived again. You know, they were so diligent now, coming almost every day, under the guise of caring for me. But now I knew they were there to monitor me, to see if I was getting more confused, making it easier for them to make their move. That day, Brenda held a thick stack of documents. Her face wore that feigned concern, and her smile was exceptionally sweet. As soon as she walked in, she said, "Mom, you know how people have been saying your health hasn't been great lately? Mark and I discussed it, and we think it's best to sign some emergency preparedness documents. Just in case, and I mean just in case, you ever feel unwell or need to be hospitalized, we can handle things for you right away, and you won't have to worry." She spread the documents on the coffee table and pushed them toward me. I knew exactly what was written on them. Though I was old, I could still read. I saw it clearly. The titles boldly declared durable power of attorney and healthcare proxy designation. I understood perfectly what this meant. Once I signed, my assets and my medical decisions would all fall into their hands. They could legally declare me legally incompetent, and then do whatever they pleased. My heart pounded like a drum, and my palms were sweating. I had to stay calm. I couldn't let them see through my act. Trembling, I fumbled in my pocket for my reading glasses, deliberately put them on crooked, and then, squinting at the documents, pretended to read for a long time. Slowly I said, "Oh dear, why are these words all blurry? Do I need new reading glasses?" Brenda immediately leaned closer, a hint of impatience in her voice, but trying to suppress it. "Mom, don't rush, I'll read it to you. This is a power of attorney. It authorizes Mark and me. In case anything happens to you, we can handle banking for you, sign hospital papers. It's all for your own good." She read so fast I couldn't make out a word. I pretended to struggle, rubbing my eyes. "Oh, you're reading so fast, and my ears aren't what they used to be. I can't hear clearly. Just tell me the important parts. All this tiny print, it's giving me a headache." Mark, standing nearby, said, "Mom, look, this is the authorization form. You just need to sign here. These were all prepared by the lawyers, you don't need to worry." He handed me a pen. I took the pen, my fingers trembling violently, not from old age, but from the anger and fear in my heart. I pretended I couldn't hold the pen steady, and the tip scratched across the paper a few times, making a grating sound. Carefully, I put the pen tip down in the signature blank, but I didn't actually press hard to write my name. I just scribbled a few random marks, then deliberately dropped the pen. Oh dear, my hand is shaking so much today, I can't even hold the pen steady. I sighed dramatically. "Could you two get me a glass of water first? I'm a bit thirsty. Maybe my hand won't shake after I drink some water." Brenda and Mark exchanged a glance. Though somewhat reluctant, they went to get me water. While their backs were turned, I quickly and very messily, with an almost unreadable hand, scribbled a few marks on the durable power of attorney and healthcare proxy designation documents. It was nowhere near my actual signature. I even deliberately let the pen tip go outside the signature box, making it look like a random scribble from an elderly, shaky hand. I knew it wasn't a valid signature, but they were so eager to get it done, they might not check carefully. When they returned, I drank a few sips of water, then pretended to try again with the pen. This time, I aimed the pen at another blank space, made a few more scribbles, then tossed the pen aside, saying, No, my hand just won't cooperate today. Never mind, I'll sign tomorrow when I'm feeling better. It's not urgent anyway, right?" Brenda and Mark's faces flashed with a hint of disappointment, but they didn't push it. They probably thought, since something was signed today, they could just come back tomorrow to finish the job. They left with those signed documents. I watched their backs, a cold smile playing on my lips. They thought they could trick me? Not so fast. After they left, I immediately picked up the phone and dialed a number. It was Sarah's, my best friend of decades. Sarah is an amazing woman, a few years younger than me, but sharp as a tack. When she was younger, she worked as a court assistant and dealt with judges for decades, so she knew legal procedures inside and out. Even though she loves to play cards and gossip with me in retirement, when it comes to serious matters, she's more reliable than anyone. The moment the call connected, tears streamed down my face before I could even speak. I poured out everything that had happened in the past few days, from Brenda taking me to the doctor, to accidentally overhearing their scheme, to them forcing me to sign documents today. As I spoke, my voice was choked with emotion. "Sarah, tell me, how could my own daughter do such a thing? She wants to kick me out of my home, to sell everything John and I built our entire lives." Sarah listened on the other end. She's usually a very calm person, but this time, she was shaking with anger. I heard her take a deep breath, then she said, "Evelyn, don't cry yet. Tell me, did you sign? Did you really sign?" I quickly said, "No." I pretended to be confused and just scribbled a few lines. It wasn't my name at all. They didn't notice. Sarah immediately sighed with relief. "Good you didn't sign, good you didn't sign. Evelyn, listen to me. You absolutely cannot let on now. Keep playing dumb, let them think you're truly incapacitated. You need to record all their dirty deeds." I was startled. "Record them? How?" Sarah immediately said, "Don't worry about how to record. I'll bring something over to you tomorrow. It's a little gadget, very discreet, and it can record all their conversations. Remember, from now on, record every conversation you have with them, with Brenda and Mark, and everyone else involved in this matter. This is your most powerful weapon, do you understand? The next morning, Sarah drove over. She pulled out a tiny gadget from her bag, smaller than my thumb, black, and completely inconspicuous. She showed me how to turn it on, how to record, how to turn it off, and how to transfer the recordings. She said, "Evelyn, this is a mini voice recorder. Just hide it under a sofa cushion, or behind a decorative item on the coffee table. As long as they're talking, it'll record everything. Remember to charge it every time you use it, and don't let them find it." Looking at that tiny voice recorder, an indescribable strength surged within me. It was like a source of reassurance, giving me a clear direction. I held it tightly, as if holding on to my hope. Sarah patted my hand, her eyes firm, and said, "Evelyn, you're not fighting this alone. We're all behind you." Besides Sarah, I also thought of my pastor, Father Miller. Father Miller is an exceptionally kind pastor. He always cared deeply for the seniors in our community, often visiting those of us who lived alone, bringing food, or just sitting down to chat and offer guidance and comfort. He was a truly compassionate person. I decided to go to the church to find him. That afternoon, I put on my best clothes and slowly walked to the church. Father Miller was surprised and pleased to see me and invited me into his office. He asked me how my health was and if anything was bothering me. Looking at his kind face, all the long-suppressed grievances and pain in my heart could no longer be held back. I told Father Miller everything about Brenda and Mark in full detail. I told him how they coveted my house, how they set a trap, how they forced me to sign documents, and how I overheard their scheme. As I spoke, tears couldn't help but flow again. I said, "Father, I truly don't know what to do. That's my own daughter. How could she do this to me?" Father Miller listened to my words, and his expression grew more and more serious. He was silent for a while. Then he stood up, walked over to me, and gently patted my shoulder. His eyes were filled with compassion and indignation. He said, "Evelyn, my child, my heart aches for you. What you've experienced is something no child should ever do to their parents. This is a betrayal of trust, and even more, a violation of all moral and ethical principles." He continued, "The church will fully support you, Evelyn. We will stand by you. Rest assured, you will not be alone in this. I advise you to immediately find a lawyer specializing in elder law. This kind of matter must be resolved through legal channels. Our church also has some affiliated lawyers. I can help you get in touch. Collect all your evidence and don't miss any detail." Father Miller's words were like a ray of light, shining into the darkest corners of my heart. With Sarah's help and Father Miller and the church's support, I no longer felt so helpless. I wiped away my tears and made up my mind. I would fight back, and I would make those greedy people pay the price. With the mini voice recorder Sarah gave me, I began my audio evidence collection operation. I hid the recorder very discreetly, sometimes tucked under a sofa cushion, sometimes behind a decorative item near the coffee table, sometimes even in my sweater pocket. Whenever they came, I would quietly turn it on. I always made sure it was fully charged, and after they left, I would immediately save the recordings and secretly take them to Sarah for backup. Brenda and Mark, as expected, still thought I was blind as a bat, deaf as a post, and completely out of my mind. When they came to my house, they spoke more and more unrestrainedly. Although their voices were hushed, on the recorder, their words were exceptionally clear. I heard Brenda complain, "Why won't this old woman still give up? That document last time, she didn't even sign it properly. Was she doing it on purpose?" Mark would say, "Who cares if she was doing it on purpose? She's senile now anyway, it's only a matter of time. Once she's completely gone, the house will be ours." One time, I deliberately turned the TV up very loud in front of them, then pretended to be busy in the kitchen. But actually, the voice recorder was hidden under the living room sofa. I heard Brenda tell Mark, "This old woman is so stubborn. I found her so much information about assisted living facilities, and she won't even look at it. She keeps saying she'll live in this old house until she dies. She's so set in her ways." Mark snorted. "Does she really think she can outsmart us young people? We've already made our arrangements. As soon as that assessment report comes out, she won't be able to do anything. Then we'll sell this old house quickly, before things get complicated. Every single one of their conversations was like a sharp knife, stabbing into my heart. My own daughter, scheming against me so ruthlessly. Listening to these words, my heart ached so much I could barely breathe, but at the same time, I felt a grim satisfaction. Because I knew these would all become ironclad proof of their crimes. They thought I was hard of hearing, that I was senile, that I knew nothing. In front of me, they revealed their true, ugly colors. They didn't know that their own shameless words were slowly digging their graves. The voice recorder was like my secret weapon, my silent witness. It faithfully recorded everything. The secrets they thought no one would hear, the evidence they tried to erase. I kept these recordings safely. They were my leverage for fighting back, my hope for survival in this desperate situation. I knew that these recordings in my hand would one day make them lose everything and pay the price for their greed. With Sarah and Father Miller's promises, a huge weight finally lifted from my chest. I knew I wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. However, determination and evidence weren't enough. I needed to find someone who could truly speak for me. Someone who could make those malicious people pay for their actions. Sarah recommended a lawyer to me. She said he was one of the best elder law experts in our state, named Harrison. Sarah said he had handled many cases like mine, was very experienced, and had a strong sense of justice. I specifically chose a bright, sunny afternoon to visit Harrison's office. His office wasn't as cold and formal as I had imagined. Instead, it was decorated quite invitingly, with landscape paintings on the walls and several green plants on the table. Harrison himself looked to be in his early 50s, his hair impeccably combed, wearing wire-rimmed glasses. His eyes were sharp but also conveyed a reassuring calmness. Unlike those young doctors, he didn't make me feel like a specimen under observation. He simply listened quietly as I spoke. I told him the whole story in full detail, from John's passing, to Brenda and Mark's concern, to the suspicious questioning at the clinic, the accidental eavesdropping, the notice from Adult Protective Services, and Brenda forcing me to sign documents. I even took out the durable power of attorney that Brenda had given me, the one where I had pretended my hand was shaking and just scribbled a few lines. Harrison took the document. He didn't rush to read the content, but first carefully examined the marks I had signed. He picked up a magnifying glass and looked at the crooked lines for a moment, then looked at my face, a faint, almost imperceptible smile appearing on his lips. He put down the document, adjusted his glasses, and said in a calm but firm voice, "Ms. Evelyn, you said you deliberately wrote your name illegibly, and that it wasn't even your real signature, is that correct?" I nodded, somewhat nervously, asking, "Will that work? Will they say I deliberately defaced the document?" Harrison smiled, a smile that showed understanding and approval. "Ms. Evelyn, you did exactly the right thing. The signature on this durable power of attorney, I can tell at a glance it's forged. Or rather, even if not entirely forged, it's certainly not a valid, legal signature. It looks more like a scribble attempting to impersonate a real signature. From a legal standpoint, it has no validity." Hearing that, the weight that had been on my chest finally lifted. Harrison continued, "Based on your testimony, your daughter Brenda and her husband Mark are implicated in several serious crimes, including fraud, forgery, and most severely, elder abuse." "Elder abuse?" I murmured, the words spoken by a legal professional sending a chilling realization through me. My own daughter, committing such a crime. "Yes, Ms. Evelyn. Attempting to deprive an elderly person of their legal rights, including property and autonomy, through deceptive means is legally a classic case of elder abuse. Furthermore, as you described, Brenda exaggerating your forgetfulness to the doctor was a deliberate misrepresentation, a fraudulent act undertaken to achieve their illegal objectives. We must act immediately." Harrison's tone became serious, his eyes filled with professionalism and decisiveness. He told me the first step was to get an independent medical evaluation. He explained that the clinic Brenda took me to had likely been influenced by her, so the credibility of that cognitive assessment report was very low. What we needed now was a completely impartial and objective assessment, proving that I was mentally sound and fully capable of managing my own affairs. So, arranged by Harrison, I went to another clinic. This doctor was completely different from the young one I'd seen before. She was a kindly old woman with white hair and thin-rimmed glasses, who spoke slowly and deliberately. Her questions weren't as intrusive as the last doctor's, and Brenda wasn't there to interject. She had me do some simple memory tests, like showing me a few pictures and asking me to recall them later, or having me solve some simple math problems. She also asked me about current events, like major news stories in the newspaper recently. The entire assessment process was very professional and fair. I felt that this doctor was genuinely assessing my cognitive abilities, not trying to trip me up. She gave me enough time to think and patiently listen to my answers. I answered all questions truthfully, without any concealment or exaggeration. After the assessment, the old doctor told me, "Ms. Evelyn, you did very well. Your cognitive abilities are perfectly normal. Your logic is clear, and your mind is sharp. You don't require any external intervention, and are fully capable of managing your own life and finances." Hearing her say those words, tears instantly welled up in my eyes. Not from sadness, but from immense relief and the joy of being validated. I finally had a real certification, proving that I, Evelyn, was not senile. I was still fully aware. This report would be a powerful weapon to refute all of Brenda's lies. When I walked out of the clinic, the whole world seemed brighter, and even the air tasted of freedom. Harrison's next plan was to lie in wait. He told me that once Brenda and Mark thought they had a valid durable power of attorney, their next step would surely be to go to the bank, attempting to freeze my accounts or transfer my funds. This was their usual trick. "Ms. Evelyn, I've already notified your bank," Harrison told me then. "I've given their legal department your situation and a copy of the forged power of attorney. They will cooperate with us and stall Brenda with various excuses when she tries to access your accounts, such as incomplete paperwork or needing further verification. At the same time, they will also record Brenda's actions and inform us promptly." Sure enough, a couple of days later, I received a call from the bank manager. The manager's tone was very apologetic. He said, "Ms. Evelyn, this morning your daughter, Ms. Brenda, came to our bank with a supposed durable power of attorney, attempting to freeze your accounts and transfer funds. Following your lawyer's instructions, we stalled her, citing the need for further identity and document verification, and told her to come back in a few days. She looked extremely frustrated when she left." As I listened to the call, a cold smile played on my lips. Brenda, you thought you were flawless, but you didn't know you had already walked into our trap." She must have been fuming, right? Serves her right. The more frustrated she was, the more it showed her eagerness to seize my money. This bank record was undoubtedly another piece of ironclad evidence. A few days later, Harrison notified Brenda and Mark that he wanted to invite them to a family meeting. He didn't disclose the specific purpose of the meeting, only stating that he hoped to resolve Ms. Evelyn's current family dispute. Brenda and Mark probably thought the lawyer wanted to mediate our conflict, or perhaps they saw it as another opportunity to legally get rid of me. They readily agreed. The meeting took place in Harrison's office. That day, I arrived early and sat next to Harrison. When Brenda and Mark entered, they still wore those familiar, false smiles. Seeing me, they feigned concern and asked, "Mom, how are you feeling? Haven't lost your wits today, have you?" I didn't acknowledge them, just gave them a cold glance. Harrison gestured for them to sit down. The atmosphere in the room was quiet, with only the faint hum of the air conditioning. Brenda cleared her throat and spoke first, her tone carrying a hint of reproach and helplessness. "Mr. Harrison, you might not know, but my mother's mental state has been very unstable lately. She often forgets things, and as her children, we're very worried. We found her an assisted living facility and arranged checkups, all for her own good. But she's been instigated by malicious people and insists on suing us. We're truly wronged. We've worried sick as her children, only to end up like this." Mark echoed her. "That's right, Mr. Harrison. We're dutiful children. We've always done our best for Mom since we were little. Now that she's old and her memory isn't good, we just want to help her plan her golden years so she doesn't suffer. Who knew? He trailed off, making a helpless expression. Listening to their synchronized performance, my heart was burning. Malicious people? Instigated? Were they talking about me? What did they take me for? A fool they could easily manipulate? I stared fixedly at them, my nails digging into my palms. Harrison didn't interrupt them, just listened quietly, occasionally nodding as if deep in thought. When they had finished their performance, he slowly began to speak, his voice not loud, but carrying an undeniable authority. Both of you, I understand your concerns as children. However, Ms. Evelyn's physical condition and cognitive abilities have been confirmed as perfectly normal through an independent medical evaluation. Therefore, regarding the claim that she is senile, we have conclusive medical evidence to refute it. Brenda and Mark's faces stiffened, but they quickly regained their composure. Brenda said, "Perhaps the doctor made a mistake, my mother, she..." Before she could finish, I didn't argue, I didn't yell. I simply, calmly, took out the mini voice recorder from my small bag. I placed it on the coffee table and pressed play. Why won't this old woman still give up? Brenda's voice, with a hint of impatience, clearly emanated from the recorder, echoing in the silent room. Who cares if she's doing it on purpose? She's senile now anyway, it's only a matter of time. Once she's completely gone, the house will be ours. That was Mark's chilling voice. Does she really think she can outsmart us young people? We've already made our arrangements. As soon as that assessment report comes out, she won't be able to do anything. Then we'll sell this old house quickly, before things get complicated. This old woman is so stubborn. I found her so much information about assisted living facilities, and she won't even look at it. She keeps saying she'll live in this old house until she dies. She's so set in her ways. Those malicious, greedy, calculating words flowed out of the recorder, clearly reaching Brenda and Mark's ears. A deathly silence fell over the room. Brenda and Mark's faces, from their forced composure, stiffened, then turned ashen, finally becoming drained of all color. Their mouths were agape, but no sound came out. Their eyes were filled with shock, fear, and disbelief. Their supposedly flawless scheme, their secret plotting that they thought no one else heard, was now being laid bare. Harrison looked at them, with no trace of sympathy in his eyes. He waited for the recording to play for a few minutes, until they were completely broken. Then he reached out and pressed the pause button on the recorder. Both of you, Harrison's voice was cold and clear, like a sharp knife, piercing their stiff bodies. These recordings will be presented in court as crucial evidence of your suspected fraud and elder abuse. Furthermore, your act of forging Ms. Evelyn's signature and attempting to illegally transfer her assets constitutes serious criminal offenses. He paused, looking at Brenda and Mark, who were now completely broken and slumped in their chairs. His tone grew even sterner. You will face multiple severe legal charges including fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. Both federal and state adult protective services and the local police department will get involved in the investigation. I advise you to start considering how you will face everything that is coming. Only Brenda and Mark's rapid, trembling breaths remained in the room. Their eyes were vacant, their faces etched with despair. They thought I was old, that I had lost my wits, and was at their mercy. But they never imagined that my recordings would make them lose everything and be publicly disgraced. In that moment, though my heart still ached faintly, it was overwhelmingly filled with a deep sense of justice finally served. After that family meeting at Harrison's office, Brenda and Mark were like their spines had been removed, slumped in their chairs, pale as ghosts. My recordings were like an invisible sword, completely shredding their masks of deceit. As I looked at them, there was no sense of triumph in my heart, only a cold sadness. When they left the law firm, they didn't say a word, just fled in a hurry. I knew their nightmare had only just begun. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Brenda couldn't hold back. She was quick-tempered and concerned with appearances. Now that she was exposed, her first reaction wasn't to reflect, but to try and slander me. She started spreading rumors among relatives and friends, saying I was senile and brainwashed, and that my old friend Sarah was malicious, instigating me against my own daughter. She even claimed Harrison was a greedy shyster who preys on the elderly for money. When these words reached my ears, I felt another dull ache in my heart. Even at this point, she was still trying to twist the truth. But I didn't argue, because I knew the truth would speak for itself. Harrison acted faster than I did. He didn't give Brenda a chance to spread those rumors widely. He had warned me when I first came to him that once this matter became public, there would definitely be gossip. He told me he would leak the story to the local media, letting the public know the truth, but would withhold my real name, only describing the events. A few days later, our town's newspaper, the Evening Star, which I read every day, ran a front-page headline. Daughter allegedly commits fraud, attempts takeover of elderly mother's property. The report didn't mention my name, nor Brenda's or Mark's, but the details within it. A 78-year-old woman, retired librarian, residing in a century-old house on Elmwood Lane, only daughter and her husband who works in real estate. Anyone in our town with half a brain could guess who it was talking about. The article detailed how Brenda and Mark meticulously planned their scam, how they took me to that shady clinic, how they tried to make me sign forged power of attorney documents, and how I gathered evidence through covert recordings, ultimately exposing their scheme. The newspaper also quoted Harrison, emphasizing the severity of such behavior and the violation of elder rights. When this report came out, the whole town was abuzz. Although I wasn't directly named, everyone understood without words. Many people who saw me at the supermarket, the post office, or the park would quietly give me sympathetic yet respectful glances. Some of my lady friends would come right up and take my hand, saying, "Evelyn, you've been through so much. I can't believe Brenda is like that." Everyone's eyes towards Brenda and Mark changed, filled with scorn and contempt. When they went out, they could feel the whispering and pointing behind their backs. They probably couldn't show their faces anywhere. Besides the media exposure, the church's influence also played a huge role. Father Miller was true to his word. That Sunday, I went to church service as usual. The sanctuary was packed, and everyone was whispering about the newspaper story. Father Miller walked to the pulpit, his expression very serious. He didn't directly name anyone, but the theme of his sermon was "Honor thy father and mother, and do no injustice." He spoke in a resonant voice. The Bible teaches us to honor our parents. This is a commandment with a promise. Those who try to exploit family ties, to use their parents' trust for personal gain, their actions not only break the law but also defy God's will and betray basic human decency. He continued, "Our church will always stand on the side of justice and always support those who are oppressed and betrayed. We will not tolerate any harm to our seniors. We are children of God, and we should understand what love and respect truly mean." Every word from Father Miller hammered home in the hearts of every parishioner. Sitting below, I heard many congregants whispering amongst themselves. Some said, "Father is so right. Those kinds of people don't deserve to be called children." Others looked directly at the spot where Brenda and Mark usually sat. Their eyes filled with indignation and contempt. I saw Brenda and Mark in the crowd. Their heads were bowed so low they almost touched their chests. They probably wished the ground would swallow them whole. With this public pressure and the church's support, the bank also quickly took action. They reported the couple's fraudulent activities to Adult Protective Services. After all, they had personally witnessed Brenda attempting to manipulate my account with forged documents. The police quickly got involved in the investigation. Officers came to my house to question me, and went to the bank to retrieve surveillance footage and Brenda's transaction records. Harrison submitted my recordings as key evidence, along with the report from the independent medical evaluation. The evidence was ironclad, irrefutable. Brenda and Mark tried to argue, claiming they were only thinking of my well-being, and that I had misunderstood them. But the malicious schemes they spoke of in their own voices on the recordings, and their act of forging documents, left them no room for denial. At the time, Harrison asked me if I wanted to go easy on Brenda and Mark, as they were my own flesh and blood. He told me that if I insisted on pressing charges, they would face very severe consequences, potentially including prison time, and their careers would be completely ruined. I was silent for a long time. Go easy on them? I did struggle. She was my daughter, the daughter I carried for 9 months. But how did she treat me? She wanted to kick me out onto the street, sell my home, leave me homeless in my old age, and even turn me into a mindless puppet. This kind of family bond isn't love, it's poison. If I were lenient this time, what about next time? How many more seniors like me would continue to suffer because of my soft heart? I looked up, my gaze firm at Harrison. No, Mr. Harrison. I will not be lenient. They must pay for their actions. I insist on pressing charges. The following days were a long legal process. I went to court several times. Each time I saw Brenda and Mark in the defendant's box, their hair disheveled, their eyes vacant, I felt a pang of sadness, but I had no regrets. They brought it on themselves. Ultimately, the court found Brenda and Mark guilty on multiple counts. They were ordered to pay me substantial damages as compensation for my emotional and financial losses, and also to cover hefty legal and court fees. Years of their savings, including the money Mark made in real estate, were almost entirely used to cover these debts. Even worse, Brenda's real estate license was revoked, meaning she could no longer work in that industry. Mark, too, had his reputation ruined in the industry due to the fraud allegations, and could no longer find a decent job. They had nothing left. Their once glamorous lives, their arrogant demeanor, all vanished into thin air. They became the laughingstock of the community, pointed at and whispered about wherever they went. The pretense of dutifulness they tried to show me now became their greatest irony. And me? I saved my home, my dignity. I still live in the house John and I shared our entire lives. Sunlight streams through the windows, and the flowers in the yard are blooming brightly. Sarah and Father Miller visit me often, bringing warmth and comfort. The congregants in the community are also caring and supportive, occasionally bringing me homemade treats or inviting me for walks in the park. Though I lost my daughter, I gained so much more. I understood that some family ties are toxic. They can corrode your trust, devour your assets, and even steal your life. Only by knowing when to cut ties can one find true freedom and peace. My life returned to calm, even more peaceful and serene than after John first passed away, because I had a heavy burden lifted from my heart. I no longer needed to pretend, no longer needed to live in fear. I knew my story might serve as a wake-up call for other seniors like me, or those who might face similar difficulties, to tell them that even in old age, they must not give up their rights and dignity. My recordings not only financially ruined Brenda and Mark, but also gave me a new lease on life.